Breaking news story. French authorities are investigating the death of South Africa's ambassador to France, Nathi Mthethwa, who was reportedly found dead after falling from the 22nd story of the Hyatt Hotel in Paris.
Paris police have just arrested the man accused of assassinating former South African ambassador Nathi Mthethwa. The suspect didn't run, didn't hide, and during interrogation, he allegedly admitted he was paid to. The money trail points straight to powerful political hands back home, and now the truth is crawling right to the doors of South Africa's leadership. If a government insider paid for this, what else have they been willing to cover up? The hitman speaks. The biggest shock in this entire case did not come from the arrest itself, but from what the suspect allegedly told French investigators once he was in handcuffs. According to sources inside the investigation, the 38-year-old man did not waste time pretending this was something random or personal. He allegedly admitted straight out that he was hired to former South African ambassador Nathi Mthethwa. The murder was planned, funded, and carried out with precision. This was no spur-of-the-moment crime in a Paris hotel. It was a paid assassination.
Well, Nathi Mthethwa did have a long history in politics here in the country. He had been French ambassador for just 1 year.
French detectives then dug deeper into his confession and uncovered the detail that shook governments on 2 continents. The money he was paid did not come from a criminal gang or a foreign enemy. It came from a South African account linked to a high-ranking political figure. The hitman allegedly explained the payment method during interrogation, telling investigators how the funds were transferred through multiple offshore accounts to hide the real source. French authorities followed the financial trail and confirmed parts of his story. When this information was sent through diplomatic channels to Pretoria, it triggered immediate panic within the ANC. Top leadership reportedly rushed into emergency meetings as they tried to understand how deep the scandal might go. If the arrest proves that someone inside government ordered the assassination of a diplomat, that would be one of the most severe political betrayals in democratic South Africa's history. Money trail exposes power. If there is one thing investigators trust more than witness statements, it is money. Money does not lie, and in this case, it is pointing fingers directly toward power. The funds paid to the hitman were not handled in a sloppy way. They were routed through offshore accounts and filtered through a consulting firm in Dubai. This company, according to leaked documents, has previous business ties to a former South African cabinet minister. That connection alone is enough to raise alarms. French tracking experts discovered a 6-figure advance payment made to the suspect weeks before the. It was the type of transaction only people with serious influence and deep financial networks could execute. The plan was clear. The assassin would receive the second half of his payout once the mission was completed and the threat of exposure was removed permanently. However, the plan fell apart. Just hours after police arrested the suspect, the second half of the payment was intercepted by French authorities. That one move confirmed that there was still someone watching closely, waiting to hit send once they believed the operation was safely finished. Whoever financed this murder was confident they would never be discovered. Now the trail is leading right back to them. French investigators are currently analyzing whether state-linked money or government-controlled accounts are part of the transfers. If the answer is yes, the entire case will explode into a full-scale international crisis. South Africans are already demanding answers, and opposition leaders are calling for arrests at the very top. Who wanted Nathi Mthethwa?
Ambassador Nathi Mthethwa's life would come to an end. The courtyard is still sealed by police. Even the hotel's staff are not permitted to go there.
When news broke earlier this year that former South African ambassador Nathi Mthethwa had died suddenly in a Paris hotel room, the official explanation did not sit well with anyone who knew him. Authorities initially pushed the narrative of a medical emergency, almost as if they wanted the world to move on quickly. No lengthy investigation, no public statements, just silence. That alone made people suspicious. Now, with the arrest of the alleged hitman, the truth has forced its way to the surface, and the original story looks like a carefully built cover-up. Mthethwa was surrounded by questions from the beginning. There were inconsistencies in the autopsy that doctors allegedly struggled to explain. Video footage from key parts of the hotel mysteriously went missing right after the incident. Witnesses who were expected to contribute crucial testimony disappeared or suddenly refused to speak. Things that never happened during a normal medical emergency were suddenly happening all at once. It felt too neat, too controlled.
But unfortunately, he had passed on. What more do we know at this point around the circumstances? Well, of course, Mfundi, it remains quite a mystery, but now the very colossal task is with the French authorities to really establish. We've seen that statement from the prosecutor's office in Paris that obviously the circumstances around this particular case would be investigated.
What makes this case even more chilling is what Mthethwa was doing in the days leading up to his death. According to sources linked to French intelligence, he had been preparing to meet an unnamed informant who claimed to possess documents exposing massive corruption involving politically connected individuals back in South Africa. Mthethwa reportedly believed the information could change the direction of major investigations and possibly topple powerful people who had abused public funds for personal gain. He allegedly told close associates that he was tired of watching criminals hide behind government positions and diplomatic immunity. He wanted to speak out and reveal what he knew. That decision likely put a target on his back. The deeper investigators dig, the clearer the motive becomes. Someone stood to lose everything if he opened his mouth. Multiple reports now suggest that the ambassador had uncovered evidence showing how foreign development funds meant to help South Africa were being stolen and funneled into private accounts overseas. These accounts were linked to shell companies and offshore firms controlled by individuals with significant political influence. Mthethwa's knowledge was not just dangerous, it was explosive. French authorities believe the assassination was triggered when intelligence leaked that he intended to go public. He was not taken out because he witnessed something years ago. He was because he was planning to expose corruption still happening today. That means whoever ordered the hit was not cleaning up old secrets. They were actively protecting an ongoing criminal network. When you put the pieces together, the question who wanted him becomes frighteningly easy to answer. Someone with political power, someone with access to state funds, someone desperate to silence a whistleblower before he could expose one of the biggest thefts in democratic South African history. A silencing operation.
Mthethwa's death has prompted a high-level police investigation after a 5-member team from the South African Police Service got dispatched to France to assist the French police to probe circumstances surrounding Mthethwa's death.
The more evidence surfaces, the more it becomes obvious that Nathi Mthethwa's was not a spontaneous crime. It was a calculated silencing operation designed to shut down a whistleblower who came dangerously close to exposing the truth. French intelligence has already confirmed that Mthethwa had gathered highly sensitive financial records before his assassination, records pointing to stolen development funds and illegal financial flows leaving South Africa. These funds were allegedly channeled through shell companies in Dubai and Europe, controlled by individuals who hold or previously held high-level positions in the South African government. The corruption was not small scale. We are talking about millions of rands meant for hospitals, infrastructure, and public services, money intended to help ordinary South Africans, being redirected to private pockets overseas. Mthethwa reportedly believed he had enough evidence to trigger arrests and political resignations. French investigators think the killers knew exactly what he planned to reveal. That means someone inside government circles was monitoring his actions closely. They knew where he was staying, who he planned to meet, and when he would be alone. This was not a reckless attack. It was executed with precision, suggesting a well-organized criminal network with resources, contacts, and state-level support. Intelligence analysts studying the case have said that this assassination follows the same pattern seen when political elites want to protect themselves. A whistleblower threatens to speak, surveillance increases, communications are intercepted, and before the truth surfaces, the whistleblower suddenly of a mysterious illness or an unexpected incident. The difference this time is that the killers failed to cover their tracks completely. The hitman's payment method became the first major mistake. Routing the money through international channels left a financial trail that French investigators were able to trace. The use of a Dubai-based consulting firm was meant to clean the funds, but instead it exposed a connection to a former South African cabinet minister, someone with a lot to lose if Mthethwa's revelations became public. The second mistake was underestimating France's determination to solve the case. Once the death looked suspicious, French authorities reopened the investigation quietly and gathered intelligence for weeks. They treated the situation as not just but a possible foreign-influenced assassination on their soil. That forced them to dig deeper and move smarter than the criminals expected. Now, political analysts in South Africa are saying this assassination was designed to protect an entire power structure. If the mastermind is exposed, it could trigger resignations, prosecutions, and a collapse of a major wing of the government. That explains the panic happening behind closed doors in Pretoria. The people involved may have believed they could bury the truth forever by killing one man. Diplomatic meltdown. The moment French officials confirmed they had arrested the suspected assassin, diplomacy between France and South Africa changed instantly. According to insiders, French authorities wasted no time contacting Pretoria through official intelligence channels. They presented what they described as credible evidence, linking the killer's payments to South African political networks. This wasn't a casual update. It was the type of message that forces governments to drop everything and shift into crisis mode. Within hours, ANC leadership reportedly entered emergency meetings behind closed doors. Phones were buzzing, members were urgently summoned to Luthuli House, and political aides were seen rushing between offices. The fear was written on the faces of those who knew how damaging this case could become if the names linked to the money trail were ever made public. The ANC had faced scandals before, but this time the stakes were on a different level. This was not corruption involving tenders or party funding. This was the assassination of a former ambassador carried out on foreign soil and allegedly paid for by someone in the South African government. French investigators did not hide their intentions either. They made it clear that they would pursue extradition, they would release findings publicly, and they would not step back even if the truth pointed directly to high office. The message was simple. France is not covering up a murder to protect another country's political reputation. Inside ANC corridors, panic reportedly spread fast. Senior members feared that some of their own could soon be facing arrest warrants, not just accusations. These concerns exploded after reports leaked that French intelligence had already traced offshore banking movements connected to a former cabinet minister. If that link is ultimately confirmed, it could mean criminal charges against a powerful figure still deeply embedded in political circles today. This scandal has also placed President Cyril Ramaphosa in a brutal position. If he appears too defensive, South Africans may believe he is protecting corrupted colleagues. If he supports the investigation fully, he risks watching his own party fracture under the weight of criminal exposure. Either choice is dangerous. The ANC's stability is at stake. Its public reputation, already damaged by years of corruption allegations, now hangs by a thin thread. Foreign analysts watching the situation have warned that if France eventually issues arrest warrants for South African political elites, diplomatic relations could snap. It could trigger sanctions, travel bans, and international legal battles that would embarrass South Africa on the global stage. Parliament explodes.
We've seen also from the South African Parliament, the presiding officers, Mr. Diza, and also the NCOP chair as well, where they also paid tribute to Mr. Mthethwa, given the fact that he was also part of, the Parliament for the longest time.
As soon as the news broke publicly that the suspected assassin had been arrested and that political figures were allegedly tied to the payment, South Africa's Parliament erupted. Opposition parties did not wait for formal evidence to emerge. They immediately demanded that President Cyril Ramaphosa address the nation and explain how a state diplomat could be murdered in Europe with money traced back to South Africa. EFF leader Julius Malema was one of the first to speak with raw anger and confidence. In front of reporters, he declared that his party had warned the country months ago that Nathi Mthethwa did not die a natural death. To Malema, this arrest was proof that corruption inside government has reached and unforgivable levels. His message to Ramaphosa was clear. If anyone inside the ANC paid for this, they must face arrest, no matter who they are. The DA, Action SA, and other opposition groups joined the attack immediately. They filed calls for an urgent parliamentary debate, insisting that local investigations must begin now and not wait for France to finish theirs. They warned that if this case is left in the hands of politicians who may be implicated, it will be buried and forgotten like so many others. Outside of Parliament, the reaction was even louder. South Africans flooded social media with outrage, shock, and demands for justice. Overnight, hashtags like "Who Paid the Killer" and "Justice" for Mthethwa took over the national conversation. People accused the government of betraying its citizens, of murdering truth-tellers, and of stealing public money to execute those who tried to stop them. Many ordinary South Africans said they no longer feel safe if diplomats themselves can be to silence corruption investigations. Political analysts warn that this scandal could become a breaking point in public trust. Many citizens already feel exhausted by years of failed promises about cleaning up government corruption. Now they see a murder tied to politics, not in Johannesburg, not in Durban, but in a foreign capital under international security systems. That level of criminal confidence is frightening. The ANC's silence has only intensified public suspicion. Instead of reassuring the country with transparency, key officials have vanished from cameras and microphones. That silence feels like guilt to many South Africans. Parliamentarians are now pushing for an independent and possibly international investigation, arguing that police within South Africa do not have the freedom or the courage to arrest those at the top. This scandal has lit a fire in the political arena, and it is not going out anytime soon. Opposition leaders smell the public smells betrayal, and the government smells danger closing in. ANC silent and cornered. The government keeps telling South Africans not to jump to conclusions. They warn everyone to wait for official findings, to trust the process, and to let investigators do their jobs. On the surface, it sounds calm and responsible. Yet anyone watching closely can see something completely different beneath that polished message. Silence is supposed to create confidence. In this case, it has only created panic. The ANC is not behaving like a party confident in its innocence. Instead of stepping forward to reassure the country, top officials have disappeared into private meetings and refused to answer basic questions from journalists. Their silence feels less like discipline and more like fear. The walls are closing in, and they know it. Insiders leak one message again and again. If France reveals the full truth about those offshore accounts and the mastermind behind the assassination, it could destroy an entire political faction within the ANC. Some of the names connected to this case are not small players. They are people who helped shape South Africa's direction for years, people trusted with the future of the nation. If they fall, their downfall will not be quiet. This is why the ANC's reaction looks less like a measured response and more like crisis management. Every time reporters push for answers, spokespeople fall back on the same line. We cannot comment until more information is confirmed. Meanwhile, panic reportedly sweeps through Luthuli House as senior members ask each other the same terrifying question: who is going to be named next? This scandal is not happening in a vacuum either. The ANC has already been weakened by corruption trials, internal factions, and years of public frustration. The last thing they can afford is to be accused of hiding a political. If South Africans begin to believe their own leaders paid to have a diplomat, the social contract between the ANC and the people could snap completely. Political analysts say the silence is a strategy. If they speak too openly, they risk contradicting themselves or confirming details that investigators are not ready to release. If they say too little, however, they look guilty. It is a trap with no safe exit. The ANC has always been able to control scandals inside its own borders. This time, the evidence is overseas, held by a European government that has no reason to protect South Africa's political elite. France does not care about factions, elections, or power struggles. They want justice for a murder committed in their jurisdiction. That makes this crisis impossible to bury. Extradition in motion. The man believed to have executed the assassination is currently sitting in French custody, and every decision made about his future is critical. France is preparing extradition paperwork and has already opened communication with South African authorities. What happens to this hitman next will reveal whether the search for justice is real or simply for show. French prosecutors have made one thing very clear. They intend to expose the entire operation, not just the man who pulled the trigger. They want to know who hired him, who financed the operation, who instructed him to silence a diplomat, and who guaranteed his protection if things went wrong. That means extradition will not be handled quietly or quickly. This case now involves a joint investigation between Paris and Pretoria, but trust between the two sides is already strained. France knows the mastermind might be someone powerful inside the South African government. That creates a serious concern. If the suspect is sent home too soon, will the truth survive the journey, or will powerful hands make sure he never speaks again? For now, the suspect remains in France, where every move he makes is monitored and every word he speaks becomes a record. Investigators are gathering more details from him every day. They believe he still holds information that could expose more names in the network that paid for the assassination. He may even be negotiating for protection, giving investigators the information they want in exchange for safety. Pressure is mounting for authorities to reveal exactly who the mastermind is. The South African public wants the truth immediately. Activists are calling for global oversight to prevent political interference. Opposition parties demand transparency and warn that without it, the government will lose what little public trust remains. There are only 3 outcomes from this extradition process, and every one of them carries massive consequences. He stays in France. France completes the case, exposes the mastermind, and South Africa faces global humiliation. He is extradited to South Africa. The world watches closely to ensure he does not disappear or suddenly fall silent. He turns on those who hired him. Plea deals and protection could lead to explosive testimony that shakes the political world. French officials already intercepted the second payment, proving they are ahead of the suspects. That means the mastermind, whoever they are, is losing control. Their biggest fear is not the arrest. It is the day the hitman sits in a witness box and points a finger at the person who believed they were untouchable. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.